Hey everyone, this is Derrick Broze with the Conscious Resistance Network. I'm here in Acapulco for the Anarchapulco 2017 conference, and I just had the pleasure of hearing the illustrious, the man who needs no introduction, Mr. G. Edward Griffin. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Derrick. Thank you.
I appreciate you taking some time to talk with me. I've been, like many people, a big fan of your work. I'm young in this movement, so to speak. I'm 32 years old now, and I've been paying attention for the last 7-8 years or so, and definitely your work and your book and some of the documentaries you produced were some of the first that I found in my path. And I think that's probably a similar story to a lot of folks who, especially with the Federal Reserve, because your work is, so seminal in that area. And today you were talking about Freedom Force International, your work to try to unite the freedom movement, so to speak, and you're discussing the idea of power and having a realization that, well, the people in power, they have it, and traditionally we're trying to let go of power, we want to remove power, but we need to find some way, some strategy to utilize that, to actually employ that. So I respect that you are not only out there trying to educate people about the problems that we're dealing with, but find some sort of workable solution to coming about that. So that's something that I consider myself trying to do as well, as a journalist and as an activist. What I wanted to talk with you today about, though, specifically relates to your experience in the freedom movement, the liberty movement, whatever word people want to use, and how you see today's climate in this movement. Some people would say there seems to be this really polar opposite opinions within the freedom movement. Those who maybe see the election of President Trump as an example of somebody going against the establishment, media, and others who say this is just the latest ruse in a long line of ruses from the New World Order, et cetera, whatever word you want to use. I'd like to get your thoughts on that situation, the division taking place related to that, and I guess your thoughts on Trump himself.
Well, that's quite a large tableau. We can wander around that one. Those are all good topics, Derrick. First, I'll start with my involvement, and this could take a long time if we wanted to, but we don't want it to. That's the least important of it. But I started out very young. I became aware, as you put it, interested, paying attention about 1960. And I was a corporate guy, and my whole life was in the corporate world. I wanted to climb the ladder and provide a nice life for my family. And even then I was thinking, someday I could be a vice president and I could enjoy the good life and all the things that people do when they're young, and properly so. But then I discovered what was really going on in the world. And I became concerned over two things. First of all, the facts that I was learning, or the facts that I came across, were alarming, because I realized that this vision I had of my little world, going smoothly, and retirement, and my children and grandchildren and all that thing, was a myth. If things continued as they were going, that was not going to happen, because our liberties were diminishing and the growth of government was out of control. So I became alarmed. And the other thing perhaps bothered me even more so is the fact that I had been denied that information. It had been concealed from me. I didn't know any of it. And I came through the school system, and I didn't know any of these facts that were so serious about the future of my family and our country and the world. So I guess a spark in me, a little crusader spark, was ignited, and I decided I would go off and tilt some windmills and try and do something about it. And that was 1960, which is a long time ago. But looking back on it is kind of humorous, because even though I was concerned and had the big picture, I did not have many of the details. And so my view of what was wrong and what needed to be done was kind of flawed, to say the least. In those days, we were all concerned about the growth and rise of communism, and rightly so. I mean, this communist empire had sprung up. It had taken over Eastern Europe. It was moving throughout all of Europe. It was strong in Latin America. We saw a strong movement in the United States, and we could just see that this red blob was going to cover the earth if we didn't do something about it. So in those days, it was all about communism, not realizing that the very things that make communism were being built right here in the name of fighting communism. It was as though we had to abandon our liberties and become totalitarian in nature in order to fight totalitarianism. Mm-hmm. Now, we didn't see that at the time. When I say we, I mean myself and the people I was associated with. It took many years for me to realize that communism is merely one variant of this thing called collectivism. Mm-hmm. And that once you peel off the label and look down and study the principles of collectivism, you find that they're the same in communism, fascism, Nazism, socialism, all of the isms that we, in some cases, have fought deadly wars to defeat. And yet, at the same time, we were building that same system under another name. We were calling it Americanism, mm-hmm. Because it was fighting communism and fighting Nazism and so forth. So that's, in a nutshell, that's my path. Mm-hmm. I came out of the position of being concerned, and then I had a long time to learn about the details. And so I came out of it thinking that we needed to do something, just like you said. We can't just know about these things if we don't do something with it. And so I spent most of my life participating in organizations, anti-communist organizations at first, and then pro-liberty movements, and I was very much enamored with the idea of the free market, laissez-faire, all of that was a very strong part of my motivation, although most of the movements were not directed that way. Most of the movements, and even today, are concerned with what are we against. Mm-hmm. We're against this, we're against that. People don't vote for candidates anymore. They vote against the other candidate. And so that was also one of the things I noticed. And I felt that there was a need to have a movement based on something that we were for, rather than just what we were against. So that, in a nutshell, is my evolution and what led me to create Freedom Force International, which is definitely based on a positive set of principles of what we believe in, not just what we're against.
Absolutely.
So that's my story.
So do you feel, with that vision in mind, that the latest incarnation of the U.S. presidential election, where again people really, now maybe there's people saying they support Trump, but we can look back to June where both the DNC and the RNC were being sued by their own people on the left for feeling Bernie Sanders got screwed out of his thing, and then people who were dissatisfied with Trump and one of their other candidates. People were, they were unhappy, and in the end, they voted for the lesser of two evils, as typical. Do you think anything has changed from 1960 and watching numerous elections? Because I myself, I go to bed at night, and it's a disturbing thought to me to realize, wow, I'm going to have to watch people play this game for the rest of my life, go back and forth. And I imagine in 4 to 8 years, there's going to be a savior from the left to come tell them they can save them from whatever they're afraid of Trump.
Precisely. That's exactly how it works.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel though Trump is anything different from the past? Or as like I said, there's some people who are like, oh, he's not a politician, he's a businessman, he's calling out the media here and that. I personally am of the belief that presidents are selected and not elected, and I don't see how this power, whether, as you said earlier, it's continuous from the Illuminati back in the day or just new groups of people using the same structures. I don't see hope in them just all of a sudden letting somebody, a true outsider, into that office.
Well, I think your skepticism is well-founded. I think it pays to be very skeptical about these things. I don't know what to think about that, but it's certainly a possibility that they allowed him to win. If that's the scenario, then the strategy would be that they know that a total collapse is coming, maybe an economic collapse, or maybe they have a collapse in mind that they will engineer, like a terrorist attack or something like that, that everybody thinks really came from some Middle Eastern source, unnamed, unknown. Yeah. But these things are all possible, and maybe they feel that they would rather have the final police state, the martial law state, forced upon us by Trump rather than a Hillary Clinton, for example, because that would make it seem more acceptable. Now, I'm not saying that's the case, but you have to consider all these scenarios when you're evaluating. This is a very complex game they're playing, and the rules are very simple, but the plays are complex. So, putting that aside, we don't really have any control over that. Mm-hmm. I think that when we evaluate a political candidate or a party, there's a terrible tendency to look at the personalities and the style, the character of the candidates, rather than the principles on which they operate. You very seldom hear anything in a major political campaign that deals with principles. Yeah. It's always about, well, we should increase Social Security.
Empty slogans.
The slogans, yeah, make America great, and Obama said, change, and all these things. People go, "Ray," as though they understood what those words mean, and they don't mean anything. And they're just words that are used to create a favorable impression in the minds of people, and so they respond positively. It's the political game. And we know this, and yet we still fall for it. And I say we, I mean as an American people, we fall for it. And you just think for a minute that all of the candidates, regardless of whether you like them or not, whether they're your person or the other guy's person, they all spend a lot of time and money doing polls to see what it is that the American people want to hear. And then they hire good speechwriters and they tell them what they want to hear.
Absolutely.
It means nothing. People should understand that. It means nothing. These speeches and statements and slogans mean nothing except vote for me. That's what they mean. So you have to look beyond that and say, well, what does the life of this person represent in terms of political principles? Well, the trouble with that is that most voters don't have any political principles either.
Yeah.
They wouldn't know how to measure it. So therein lies one huge task, and that's one of the reasons for Freedom Force, is to create an awareness and appreciation and an affinity to a set of principles that are not really political in the sense of Republican or Democrat. It's not partisan political. It's ideologically political. In other words, what should be the function of the state? What should it do? And what should it not do? If we can get clear on those things, then we can evaluate a candidate or a political party and say, well, where does it stand on these principles that I believe in? And just to give you one example, the principle of what is the source of rights? Do I get my rights from the state? Or am I born with them? Are they part of my body? Does it come when I'm born? Is it, some people say God-given rights, or others would say, well, I don't know about that, but every right is yours when you're born. It's hardware, not software. It's not added to you. Now, if a candidate believes that your rights come from the state, well, then it means the state has the power to take them away. Absolutely. Anytime it wants to. Yeah. So this is an important principle among several. We have to learn how to think about these principles, and that's what Freedom Force is all about.
Absolutely.
Now, back to Trump. Unfortunately, I don't see much in Trump that defines his principles. He takes sides with large voting blocks. He's against illegal immigration, which everybody says, hooray. Well, not everybody, but a lot of people say that's good. We should not have illegal immigration. We should have legal immigration. But there's no political principle in that. It's just that, well, that is a matter of reality, and other efficiency. Is it security for the nation? Can we afford it? Things like that. Not really based on principle, but on
pragmatism.
Pragmatism, yeah, exactly. So we have to get to the political principles, and that's what we're trying to do.
Absolutely. I think that's really just an important point to emphasize, because, as you were saying in your talk, you can understand that there's something wrong. And a lot of people do spend their energy, well, now I know I'm against this. I want this to go down. And what I've seen in my experience is activists and researchers, if they don't find some way to channel that sort of that awareness and, like you said, that negative approach, it can turn into, well, just sort of an angry, hateful outlook towards, well, we need to take them down violently, or we need to, do or even lend itself towards apathy. So it's like awareness combined with action, so that we can help people have tools. And yeah, you have to know the principles you're fighting for. The majority of the public, I would say, isn't principled, and that's why they're so easily swayed back and forth by these politicians. Yeah,
they're swayed by emotions and hate and envy. And that's not an accident. These people go to school to learn how to do that. They actually hold classes on how to manipulate public opinion using their emotions. So we need to know that, and we need to defend against it.
Well, thank you for your time. Please check out freedomforceinternational.com. Is that
Well, it's .org.
.org?
I think .com gets you there too, but
Okay.
.org is the place. And
find out how to connect to G. Edward Griffin, and I definitely recommend reading everything you have online, because you've put some pretty extensive time and effort
Well, thank
into
you.
that. So thank you for all you do.
all right, thank you very much.
Thank you.